Be discussing the staffing and IT budget. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future viewing. So if you cannot make it, you can watch it on video. And I will hand it over to Mr. Frazier, sorry.
Good morning. So the first few slides of my presentation are really just some highlights of the Information Systems Department, just to try to familiarize people with the work we do and the scope of the work. So here opens up with the organizational chart. You can see that we have fundamentally two groups. One group is our technicians day-to-day. They're like our help desk. There are our AV technicians, our desktop technicians, our technicians that are in the buildings directly supporting teachers and students. And then we have a second group who are the people that are working behind the scenes on some of the large systems that we operate, like Power School and some of the more operations-related databases, as well as other instructional databases. We have a web developer. We have a newly hired information security analyst, and we have also an identity management technician. So it's not a terribly big group, but we are able to support the district, I think, well, and you'll see that in these numbers coming up. So this is just, again, an overview of some of the equipment. We have over 17,000 pieces of equipment on our network right now, and that's from Macs, PCs, Chromebooks, the devices that are directly related to the work that we do. Other things that people don't consider, like voice over IP phones and security cameras and set-top boxes. So this is just, again, an overview of the equipment that we're keeping running on a daily basis. Other equipment that we also maintain, we have, for example, students with health monitoring systems on our network and interactive projectors, large space AV systems like this one that we're using now. We have 32 of those throughout the district that our AV technicians keep operational. In terms of applications, both administrative and student-facing, you could see there the numbers. We have 120 online applications. That's a joint effort between the IS department and the curriculum department to keep those operational. And of those, there's 49 different user management systems. And I mention that only because there's a lot of work involved in keeping all these instructional systems running that sometimes people don't have an appreciation for. So again, just an overview of the work we do. This is just a visualization of the number of tickets that we receive. So to date, we've had over 12,000 tickets this academic year. And you can see that peak there in the middle of September. That peak is obviously when teachers come back and students come back and things get pretty busy. During a 7-week period there, from August through September, we had over 4,000 tickets. So you can imagine it's an extremely busy time for everyone in the IS department.
And these are help desk tickets?
Help desk tickets, yeah. I'm sorry, yes, help desk tickets.
And when somebody forgets their password, you don't create a ticket, right? So there's probably...
We do have a system for people to reset their own passwords to help reduce that number. But many times that's just a direct call right into the help desk to help.
Right, so they're probably doing a lot more work than it looks like here, even even with that.
Everyone will tell you I encourage everyone to submit help desk tickets, but there are a number of support calls that are not reflected in here. Continuing on, we do a lot of hardware repairs in-house. Again, this is to date, we've conducted over 1,000 repairs, over 1,100 repairs, more accurately. We have seen an uptick in repairs, which was anticipated because we have a lot more devices and backpacks going home this year than we did in previous years. So they do get damaged on occasion, and we try to conduct those repairs in-house to reduce the amount of turnaround time that it takes to get a device back into service.
And this was the first year that the 8th graders had MacBooks, right? Or did they?
No, they had them last year.
Okay.
But what is, and you'll see this in a couple slides, this is the first year where we're issuing 8th graders a Mac that they will use for the rest of their secondary career.
I'm sorry, if they had like protective coverings. Use your microphone. Oh, sorry. I can project those.
If they have protective cases, would that minimize some of the damage that's being done?
It does. It certainly does. That'll help with like a drop. But like if a student has something on the keyboard and they close the lid, it'll crack the screen as an example. Okay. Sometimes the lid will get pushed back far and it'll crack the hinges. So we do put a fairly robust protective case on the devices, but many times it's as a result of something in between the keyboard and the screen, and it'll get cracked, as an example.
Right.
And I mention that only because about 50% of the MacBook Air repairs there are a result of cracked screens.
And don't the parents get insurance for the?
Yes. So yeah, so a cracked screen is about a $300 cost to repair. The parents pay $100. Let me back up for a second. So in terms of insurance, it's like automobile insurance. You pay a premium and then you pay a deductible. So the premium on the Macs, for example, is $70. And then if there's damage that's not covered by warranty, there's plenty of warranty repairs too, but if there's damage like a cracked screen, the parents pay a $100 deductible towards the repair of the screen, which is about $300 total.
Oh, so the district then picks up the balance of that?
The insurance does.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, I'm confused, like who was responsible ultimately. Okay, so the insurance does cover that part. Okay, thanks.
Just in terms of client support, people often forget that we're also supporting parents. We get calls and emails and help desk tickets from parents. So we're maintaining their accounts as well for various systems like PowerSchool and Blackboard, our website. So that the parents have really become part of the clients that we support. So it's again, I mentioned this just to give an idea of the scope of support that the IS department provides. So in terms of the budget, to start moving into the budget, this is a chart that just compares the budget from last year to this year. Overall, the IS department budget has gone down. You can see there, actually, it's the last bullet that it's gone down by $137,000. What's new this year is we have fully implemented the new one-to-one deployment model. Again, I'll talk about that here in a couple slides. We are looking to move more to Microsoft's cloud offering, allowing, as an example, people to have access to like Office products online, like you would now with like a Microsoft Outlook account. With that, we're also looking to move our Exchange, which is our email systems, to Microsoft's cloud. What else is new this year is we have implemented some more cybersecurity in URL and DNS filtering. We are planning to conduct a voice phone system upgrade as well. So there's some of the highlights, what's new that's reflected in that in our budget increase in some areas. Our instructional computing cost has actually gone down, and that's because of that new deployment model that I'll explain here shortly. But you can see also that some of our hardware and software maintenance has gone up, security has gone up a little bit, outsourced services has gone up, as well as our new initiatives. So there's although the IS department budget usually stays relatively flat on a year-to-year basis, how we spend that money moves around depending upon where we need it and what needs to be replaced and what new services we're starting or retiring. So although the budget stays relatively flat year to year, it does move around within its own categories.
I have a question on the migration from, I guess we're moving from Google to Microsoft, is that right, or no?
No, there we go. We're not changing our Google services presently. Presently we maintain our email servers here in-house. We host them here in-house. We really need to move away from a local hosted email to Microsoft's cloud solutions. So we're starting that migration, and with that, what's nice about it is we're able to leverage the buying consortium for Microsoft products. So we're going to be able to move from, or add value by allowing people to continue to run Microsoft products like they would traditionally on their computers. But we can also offer that a whole suite of online products too that Microsoft offers. Really not for much because of our educational pricing with Microsoft. But the heavy lift in this is moving our email services from here locally to their sort of online offering.
Okay, and that's mainly for the administration, teachers, or is it for students too, or?
It's mainly administration and teachers. So we maintain all our email services for teachers and administration will move with that. So that it's primarily administration and teachers. It should be fairly invisible to the people that are using it day to day. Yes.
Just real quick, sorry, just for clarity, when I'm looking at this slide, the 2021-22 is blue. And then the 2022-23 is the proposed for, is red, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just making sure that everybody can see it, because it's obvious, but not completely. And then so, real quick on that last question, the students are going to be on Google Classroom and Google and all those pieces, and the administration is going to be on Microsoft Outlook and the cloud, and the crossover will, for future, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they'll be on like SharePoint and all those things that most of us are used to.
It should, and our hope is it will be invisible to our users, so when they connect to get their email, instead of them connecting locally, they'll be just connecting to Microsoft's cloud. But then we can offer all those Office products in addition to that. For the students, it'll remain the same. And when we look at Google, we often see like Google Docs and Google Sheets and Google Classroom. But what Google has become the default directory service for a lot of online products. Meaning, like when you go to a website and you see like log in with your Google account. So a lot of products are using Google for their account management. So, and I mentioned those 120 products. Some of those products are, the students log in using their Google accounts. So I don't think you're going to see Google go away anytime soon, simply because, not because of Google Docs or Google Sheets, but because they've become the default directory service for a lot of products out there. So when you arrive at a new website, or even websites you use often, look and pause and see if you don't see like log in with Google. And what happens, you click that, and that product now checks with Google and says, oh, okay, they have an account, I'll let them in. So they're handling their account management. And for that reason, I think you're going to see Google in a lot of products for a very, very long time.
And just for everyone's, can you explain what the teachers use and administration uses as opposed to the students in terms of, like, you get a Dell as opposed to a Microsoft or not a Microsoft, a Macintosh?
Sure. Let me jump a couple slides ahead, and so this is what students presently are issued in terms of devices. So if you're K1, you're using an iPad. 2 through 4, you're using a Chromebook. 5 through 7, Chromebook, and then in 8th grade, the students are issued the MacBooks we were talking about. And I had mentioned a new deployment model. So what that deployment model looks like now is in elementary, 2nd grade, students will receive a Chromebook, a new Chromebook, and that will be their Chromebook for the 3 years that they're in elementary school, so 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and then that Chromebook will become a loaner Chromebook. For when a student damages a Chromebook or needs a loaner for whatever case. So we're getting 4 years out of the Chromebooks. Same model is true at the middle school. So a student arrives at 5th grade, they're going to get a new Chromebook. They'll use that Chromebook for 3 years, 5, 6, 7, and then that Chromebook in its 4th year of life cycle will become a loaner device, and it'll be a loaner device in that school. 8th grade students will receive a new MacBook, and that MacBook will become their MacBook for 5 years. So what's new is we're going to try to get 5 years out of the MacBooks instead of 4. So we're going to try to stretch that into 5 years. So hopefully in 4 years I'll be reporting that was a good decision, and I think it will be. The Mac makes a fairly robust device. Or I should say Apple makes a fairly robust device. So the students will be using those for 5 years, and then the 6th year of that life cycle, the students either buy it when they're a senior or it becomes a loaner and will be part of that loaner pool for a 6-year life cycle. So that's the reason for the instructional budget going down, because this is the first year that we are only purchasing for 8th graders and not 8th graders and 9th graders. This year we had to purchase for 8th graders and 9th graders. But this will be the first. This coming year will be the first year we buy for 8th graders, and we'll be starting that 5-year use. Did that answer? So, I don't know that I answered your question fully though. So, in terms of administration, really, it's a choice. We permit people to pick the device that they want to use, either Dell or Mac, and it falls pretty much along. Business users usually rely more on the Dell. You'll see more of the instructional people picking Macs. So you may see an administrator with a Mac or an administrator with a Dell, but I think it falls mostly on that business line of. Like everyone you'll see in Vic's office, for example, has a Dell. You won't find a Mac in Vic's office, as an example.
Thank you.
Certainly. So just to jump into the actual budget, this is a percentage how the 5.4 million is broken up in terms of percentages. You can see there that the largest percentage of the spending is on instructional computers and one-to-one. And then you can see there the next largest area is hardware and software maintenance, followed by security. We have committed more funds to security and outsourced services. In terms of actual numbers, this is how it breaks out in terms of actual numbers. So 2.5 million is budgeted for next year for instructional computers. And you can see 1 million there for hardware and software maintenance.
I have a question on the hardware and software maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
What does that encompass? Does that include the instructional computers getting repaired, or?
I have a slide, I'll give you some highlights on that, okay?
Sorry,
Nope.
I obviously didn't preview this in my slide.
Wasn't there.
Thank you.
So in terms of, so the next few slides are going to break down those categories in the spending, okay? It's not, the slides aren't comprehensive, it's not everything that's in each category, it's highlights of what's in each category. So in terms of instructional computing and one-to-one, these numbers do include the teacher devices. So when I refer to instructional computers, this particular slide does include cost for teacher computers. And you can see there that the highest amount of spending is for the middle school. And again, that's because we're buying those 8th graders the Macs that they'll use for 5 years. So that's why that cost is high. Now, these numbers will vary year to year. And again, it varies because if we're replacing a lab, for example, if a lab has seen 5 years of use and we're refreshing that lab, there might be a change in cost here as an example as a result of that. But basically this breaks down where that 47% of the budget is spent. Okay. This is the deployment model that we talked about a minute or two ago. And again, we'll see how this deployment model works, and hopefully that 5-year plan with the MacBooks will prove beneficial. Again, this just further breaks down the instructional cost. So what's it cost to issue MacBooks to 8th graders? It's $1 million. What's it going to cost in Chromebooks? Now that Chromebook cost there is a little high this year because we're trying to finally retire some very old Chromebooks. We do still have some old Chromebooks out there that we're trying to retire so that all the students are using a more current version. But that also includes the Chromebooks that'll be issued to 5th graders. We will maintain those Chromebooks over 3 years. And then you can see the 700 Chromebooks at the elementary level. That's the Chromebooks that'll be issued to the 2nd graders. And then we do purchase some spares for enrollment and replacement reserves if necessary. And what's nice is we usually take that reserve and then we will, for example, this year we were able to take our reserves and we started refreshing teacher computers early that we knew were going to be busy this coming year. So we said, all right, who's going to have a really busy summer? Middle school teachers. Okay, let's start refreshing their laptops now. So that's one less thing that they have to worry about this summer. So we took our reserves and we applied them where we thought we could best reduce any stress with this coming year.
I'm sorry, can I ask a real quick question?
Sure.
So you're hoping to get 5 years out of a Mac. Mm-hmm. Good luck. I think the kids will do better than I do with my Mac. How long Chromebooks last? They always feel cheaper to me, sorry, but they're light for the little guys.
So they are inexpensive. They're meant to be inexpensive. Yeah. They're meant. The manufacturers of Chromebooks are very, very clearly trying to target industries that may not have as many resources to purchase a Dell, for example, or I should say a Dell laptop. We feel that we can get 3 years out of those, and then a 4th year as a loaner device. So so we're responsible for devices from cradle to grave. So from the time we purchase it to the time that it's properly recycled is our responsibility. So what refreshing those after 4 years permits us to do is when we work with the recycling company, we get just a little bit back that pays for the cost of recycling. So it's almost like they're not necessarily charging us for the recycling because they're getting a little bit of value back on those. So we feel that we can get 3 years. Then in that 4th year, we kind of go through them and we take the best that will be loaners. And then the ones that are a little rough around the edges, we recycle, and they have just enough value that it doesn't cost us anything to recycle them properly. So there's that seems to work well for the Chromebooks, where the MacBooks, they are a robust device, and we feel that we can get a little bit longer out of them.
Great, and it's nice to hear that everything's getting recycled. I figured, but
Yeah.
it's nice to hear it out loud.
Yeah, and the nice part about it is, like I said, we get a little bit back from the recycling company for not everything, but it also usually covers the cost of us recycling things that don't have any resale value or don't have any recycling value. There's a lot of, God bless you, there's a lot of equipment that we recycle properly that, again, has cost to recycle, but doesn't have any resale value.
I have a question in reference to the recycling. Who do we use for recycling?
Presently, we use a company called Sycamore.
Sycamore. And I was also curious too, because in reference to the MacBooks, because according to the company, they have a 3.5 years of life cycle. So what do we do to stretch that out?
Apple's telling you they have a 3.5-year life cycle. I would argue that we are able to sell Macs on eBay 5 years.
Really?
People will, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that may be a little Apple marketing that their devices are only good for
Okay.
3.5 years.
Okay.
I mean, so we will take the MacBooks. The graduating seniors this year will have an opportunity to buy their MacBooks. For those that don't buy their MacBooks, we then go through them and we pull out what we think is the best, and we'll use them as loaners for next year. So we're already getting 5 years of use out of MacBooks, and then we'll take what's left of that and we'll sell some on eBay, because people will come to us and ask to purchase MacBooks or purchase equipment, and we do that through eBay. And people will still buy those, so
Okay, thanks.
certainly. Okay, so this is, you had asked, like, what's some of the things that we're spending in hardware and software. And again, these next few slides are just really highlights of each category. And I tried to pull from each category highlights just to give you an idea. So one of our costs is Adobe Creative Cloud. That's a product that we put on instructional computers for students, and it's the Adobe suite of products. It's Photoshop, if you will, and their suite of products. This year we're going to be continuing to support Blackboard, so learning management system. I mentioned the Microsoft products that we'll be leveraging for our Microsoft migration to their cloud. So that's like the fact that we're only spending $200,000 on Microsoft products is fantastic. A lot of savings there. Apple client management. We need software to actually manage all those Macs that are out there. Technicians very rarely go one-to-one device and manage them. We manage them like a herd. We'll send out a software update, and all those devices will pull down that software update throughout the day or throughout the week. ClassLink is another product that's a single sign-on product for instructional software. And again, just trying to give you a flavor of where some of this cost goes. And I think we're all familiar with Power School. So maintaining these products year to year has a maintenance cost. Security has certainly been at the forefront of a lot of thinking lately for all of us, for a variety of reasons. So our cost there, email protection, trying to reduce the amount of spam that people are receiving and phishing emails. That's 18,000 a year. Endpoint protection, you can see we use a product that's an antivirus, but it's a little bit more so. It's called an EDR. We have security and event management monitoring, firewall maintenance, backup and storage, and incident response. So our cost has gone up in security as we become more mindful about security. Sure.
Go ahead.
Just two questions real quick. When you look at this type of security, does this overlay with the web security, or is that in a separate area?
You mean our email filtering?
Or just the website being hacked in general?
Yes. So as an example, firewall maintenance. The firewall only permits certain traffic into our websites that we host locally. So to answer your question, yes. You're going to see later on our web filtering, though, is underneath of a compliance slide.
Okay. Second question real quick. So Microsoft Office, will that increase, like switching, because you have email protection in here, will switching over to the cloud and Microsoft put a different layer of security in that is positive, negative, neutral?
Well, positive in that Microsoft will then be responsible for maintaining the email servers. And this kind of gets into a whole patching conversation. So if a vulnerability is found on our email servers, here we're locally racing to try to get that installed. When we migrate to Microsoft's cloud, they'll then be responsible for patching. Now, I want to say to you that means we'll be more secure, and I believe that's true. But it doesn't mean that there won't be vulnerabilities in Microsoft's cloud, right? It's really just someone else's computers. So there's still the possibility of a vulnerability, but they'll be responsible for patching it.
So my question was, in terms of the updates that you send, the herd updates, do you give the kids notice that it's coming, or they just get them and they respond to them? Because then that would be a security risk, right?
Very true. So it depends on the platform. So a Dell user will be prompted, or will say like, hey, you need to restart your computer. Most of the time the patches can either install silently and people don't know it at all, or it requires a restart. So a Dell users will get a pop-up box that will say, hey, you need to restart your device, or it needs to be restarted tonight. On the Chromebooks are actually very good about patching themselves. They'll download those patches, and the students, again, they'll see a prompt to restart. The MacBooks are a little bit trickier to patch, but we do prompt the students to restart there as well. That's a little bit tougher one. Getting students to restart their Macs is tricky. So, outsourced services, and again, this is another area that has gone up. We do hire supplemental staff every summer because of the amount of work that's needed to get ready for the following school year. We have Tier 1 support for Apple products, consulting fees. We have a service that we rely on for Power School to help us with some Power School maintenance, only because Power School has become mission critical to so many things that we do. We really can't have Power School outages for very long. And we are planning to upgrade our phone system this year, so we've budgeted money for professional services for that. So that's one of the areas that they go up in terms of cost. Just our fiber, we have fiber optics throughout the district. For example, we just this month was able to connect Black Rock Middle School to our network. So we have You'll hear the word metropolitan area network. We have a metropolitan area network. So all of our buildings, like a spoken hub, are connected via fiber back to this building. So when you drive down the street and you see the cabling on the telephone poles, some of that cabling is actually ours. And that's how we connect all the buildings back to our data center here. So that's that fiber optic cost. Our internet services and DDoS mitigation services, and then finally a redundant fiber connection. But we are becoming more and more reliant on having internet connectivity. Losing internet connectivity can bring a lot of things to a sudden halt. It's not a coincidence that I have a student there using a Chromebook. A Chromebook, for example, relies very heavily on a constant internet connection. So should we lose internet, those Chromebooks, they're not going to work nearly as well. So it's just an example of how reliant we've become on our internet services. New initiatives, I mentioned the migration a couple times. This is some of that cost, the migration of our Exchange to Microsoft. There's a lot of jargon in this migration. Exchange is our email servers here locally. Azure is the name of Microsoft's cloud. So we're basically moving again our email and what's called our directory services to Microsoft's cloud. And then we have to figure out how to do an online backup for that. We can't necessarily rely on Microsoft for offline backup. We have an offline backup solution, so we're going to try to leverage our offline backup solution rather than incurring more costs with Microsoft. And then we also want to make sure that we've done it right. So after we do the migration, we want to conduct a post-migration security review before we move thousands of accounts and a lot of information over to Microsoft.
So would these be one time?
Yes. These are all one-time cost. I mentioned compliance a little bit ago. iBoss is our web filter, and that's in compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act. That is everyone's favorite topic because we do filter fairly heavily. And it's, again, there is a compliance requirement to that. But it can be a little bit tricky, like a new website that hasn't been categorized yet will be blocked. So until we get it categorized, it won't be accessible. So there's a little bit of trickiness with that. And then ADA compliance, we've seen a growth in ADA compliance requirements like closed captioning, and that's the cost of that. Just some training highlights and where we do have a training budget. 12,000 of that goes now to phishing training for employees. So that's new this year. So that's really a reoccurring cost. But other training highlights, for example, Power School and security training, Microsoft Azure training, which I mentioned. And we also do some internal policy and procedure training as well that I just want to make sure I highlighted. So I enjoy this presentation every year because I get to teach about the network. Many people think it's just a network. It's like, oh, it's the network. And it's like, not really. There's distinct parts of the network. So as an example, we are actually on the far right. We right now are part of the 17,000 plus devices that are participating on the network. And we're all connected to an access point. Those access points are in turn connected to access closets, and presently we have 71 of those throughout the district. And then from there, we're connected to what's called the distribution layer of the network, which is where all that networking consolidates in each building. And then I mentioned the fiber optics. So it would be, there's fiber optics between the distribution and the core. And then in the core, there's a firewall that connects us to the internet. Now, the reason why I point all this out and the reason why I like to explain this is because in the next slide is our capital cost. And it's in those capital costs that you'll see cost to refresh portions of the network. So you'll see like distribution switches, access switches, wireless network. So there's cost to replace these things and you'll see it's over a 5-year plan. So our 5-year obsolescence plan, next year we're going to be replacing distribution layer switches in our data center. So they're the switches that all the closets here in the DAO, as well as the data center, connect to. We have some video mixers to replace in the high schools, Dell backup storage solution, which actually was on the F&P agenda last week, and the Dell Cisco phones, the Cisco phone systems that I mentioned previously. This is for the equipment. What you saw previously was the professional services to help us do that. Going back to that network diagram, our wireless network needs to be refreshed. Now we're into 24, 25. When we get this far out, we start encountering things like end of life, end of support. So a vendor will start announcing end of life, end of support. And I mention that because sometimes we have to move these things around. So if a vendor says they're going to support something longer, we may move it out a year so that we can use it for another year rather than refreshing it. Or sometimes they move it up and they'll announce end of life sooner than we anticipate. So when you get out into years 3, 4, and 5, sometimes these things change year to year. So in 24, 25, we anticipate having to replace what's called our SRST routers. These are the routers that permit buildings to make phone calls should our fiber optics be broken between the buildings that I mentioned earlier. We have some access layer switches that we need to replace in our elementaries and middle schools, and we're going to be looking to replace that core layer with the firewalls, IPS, and data center tap. So that's quite a bit of refresh in that year. Moving out further to 25, 26, now we're looking at the access layer switches in the high schools as an example, replacing those. And then 26, 27, we're looking at the distribution layer switches in the buildings with some additional projects there. So I think that is it. Yep, please.
Going back to that slide real quick, it looks good in the first year, 325, and then it like spikes and then it goes down a little. Do you think it's going to plateau? What is the future trends? Because knowing I know it's hard to guess what you need to replace and what you don't need to replace. There just seems like a big gap between year 1 and year 2, and then year 1 to year 4.
The year 1 is actually lower than, that's actually the low year. That's the valley year that we typically don't see. In terms of it plateauing, I mean, we try to keep to a number, which is around, I think, Vic, correct me if I'm wrong, that 700, 750. We try to stick to that number. So those last 2 years are a little high in comparison to where we normally are. Hopefully we'll see a different end of life or end of support, and we'll be able to move some of those things around. And also, this is capital funds, so we also have to plug it into the other projects that are being conducted throughout the district. So there's a few things that we're kind of juggling there, and that is, what do our resources look like locally? What's end of life, end of support? I guess it's really those two that would be the main driving factors of how we try to fit these projects in year to year.
So why is this year, like, that's like a reduction by like 50% from your average or norm, I should say?
And it's only, it's a couple things. It's primarily, there was nothing that was end of life, end of support that was driving like, oh, we need to replace this year. And I believe also when we were looking at this, we were also thinking, hey, we're opening up a new middle school and we're going to be really busy. So how many projects can we really feasibly take on this year? So I think it was those two factors that mostly drove our planning for this year.
Thanks.
Certainly.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
Thank you. Yeah. Oops. Yeah, it was. Thank you. I know how much everyone enjoys that. Yeah.
Do you need it?
Yeah, my Mac is not getting on it.
No, well, it didn't work out. It didn't, fell through. So, but it was still nice. It was still a good trip. But the fishing didn't happen.
Yeah, I just give me the final one.
Yeah, I did see that email. It's got to be a network issue because your phone's actually connected first to the network, and then there's a cable that comes off your phone and goes to your laptop. So there's got to be every once in a while those the ports on the switch.
You should start like saying it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's like it's a little.
And that may help too. Sorry.
With the filters. The All-Star is smiling.
Yeah, that way.
Okay. So, I'm sorry? Yeah, we can wait. Yeah.
All right, good morning. This is part two of our Finance Committee presentations this morning, and I'm here to present an overview of our staffing across the district. So this presentation will highlight, or try to highlight the staffing side of what we do. I mean, why we're here is for students, but this is a really a focus on how we staff and to support a variety of services that we offer as a school district. So
Do you want to just give an introduction of yourself
Oh,
for
of
the
course.
people who are watching?
Yes, thank you. I'm Megan Schaefer. I'm the assistant to the superintendent for district administration. And in that capacity, one of the roles that I play is overseeing our human resources department, staffing, et cetera. So it's really, I think, the heart of what I do. I like to think of it that way. And so I'm really happy to be able to share all that goes into human resources and supporting our students in the district. So just to provide a little bit of an overview to this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about an overview of the organization. We'll talk about staffing formulas and factors, move into our 22-23 staffing plan, then we'll touch on or dive deeper into the salary and benefit costs, and then finally wrap up a little bit with a introduction of the Human Resources Department and the future as we see it relative to staffing and supporting our staff. So first, in a number of these presentations, and why we're here is our commitment to students and providing the best instructional, co-curricular and extracurricular experiences for the children of this district. So that's our why. And how do we do that? Primarily is through the people that we hire. And while George talked a lot about the equipment that makes it function, he also has an amazing team that make all of those things work and connect those things to our students and to our families and to our staff to support the instructional program. So as you know, we have over 8,600 students. As George mentioned, we see our purpose as serving families as well. So, that expands our scope of service to over 17,000 parents and guardians. And then, and I'll explain a little bit how we see our role as really supporting our community of over 62,000 residents. We currently have 10 school buildings and 15 total buildings across the district, over 250 acres of land that we manage. Obviously, that number increases next year with adding an 11th school and another 35 acres to maintain. So with that, obviously, there are staffing implications. So beyond the classroom, and I'm going to keep going back to, I don't want to diminish what we do, what's core to our mission, but these other services are really key to providing the support I just mentioned. So I'm going to give some highlights, pulling some data that you heard previously in the presentations, but I think this helps provide that understanding or that background to why we staff the way we do. So, for example, nutritional services, which I don't think has been highlighted yet, but is key to providing meals to all our students, but critically to almost 1,200 students who are in our free and reduced lunch program. We serve over 4,300 students lunches daily. Since the beginning of the pandemic, which I think is a notable number, we've served nearly 1 million free meals. And so that's done with a staff of approximately, we currently have approximately 32 nutritional staff members that provide this service. We are slightly understaffed at this point. We utilize other support staff members, such as our drivers, to help deliver those services during the midday, because we are seeing, we're leanly staffed at this point. So I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Yeah, I'm going to circle back to that. So again, this is across, the 10 buildings. Bringing another building online next year will invite us to add additional staff to those ranks so that we can provide these services to the new Black Rock Middle School. Another key service, certainly during the pandemic, but in our good times, our health services department is quite busy. We provide nursing services to over 14,000 students because it's not just our public schools, but also non-public schools. We support field trips, school, before and after school activities. We have over 1,800 students in our public schools alone that have special health needs that require nursing assessment, treatment, medication, et cetera. Some of the data in a given year, over 40,000 student visits for illness, 8,500 for injury. Our nursing staff provides training, CPR training to our staff. So not only are they providing direct support to students, but they're also training our staff in sort of critical areas. And then they do the annual mandated health screenings, which again are tens of thousands over the course of the year. And although it's notable that the PA Department of Health suspended those requirements, our nursing staff has managed to and will manage to complete all of those screenings successfully by the end of this school year. And then more of a special acknowledgement to their work over the pandemic of, again, offering 8 different clinics, 6,200 doses of vaccine administered by our nursing staff and community volunteers, but was organized by our nursing team under the leadership of Terry Quinlan, who, as you saw, is retiring and is, obviously big shoes for us to fill. We've administered over 10,000 COVID rapid tests, 2,000 family contacts about positive tests, managing that throughout the pandemic, ongoing guidance to our schools, departments, daily, if not hourly, and daily collaboration with the Montgomery County Office of Public Health regarding implementation of our COVID mitigation measures in the district. So, it's certainly a special acknowledgement to that work, as we did not add additional staffing to support that work. Clinical and counseling services, I think Kimberly Frazier has done over the course of the last few meetings a nice job of highlighting some of the critical areas that we support as a district. Again, outside of the classroom environment, but again, critical needs. We sort of have, I think, as schools have over time become that maybe the only place or the first place where a student who may be in crisis or a family who may be in crisis gets noticed, and where connections are made to important resources may happen through our school counselors, may happen through our school social workers, may happen through our school psychologists. And so when we talk about meeting students' needs and families' needs, these highly qualified, experienced staff members are critical to supporting our student well-being, which is obviously foundational to their success in the classroom. So when we talk about school psychologists, we have 13 that support the 10 schools, 8,600 students across the district, and then some. So the volume that we support with the team that we have, I think is a testament to how carefully we consider what the needs are and try to meet, the needs as effectively, but also as fiscally minded as possible. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later as we get into the details of next year's staffing. Other services, George Frazier spent a nice amount of time this morning detailing all of the technology services that we provide. And again, it's not just about students, it's staff, it's families, and the number of devices is pretty extensive. And currently, I think his team is approximately 21, not including 2 administrators. But when you think about the volume and the numbers on that team supporting what we're trying to do as an organization, we're again very mindful of matching needs with the staffing that we bring on into the organization. Facility service, again, obviously we have wonderfully maintained buildings. We're very fortunate to live in a community that supports that. But we also, I think it's notable that we spend, there's average over 10,000 hours per year of our facilities that are used by community groups. So it's not just about what we're providing for students, but the opportunities that our facilities provide for other outside groups, athletic leagues, scouts, et cetera. So it's not just about opening the doors. We need staff that are there to open the doors, to clean the floors, to empty the trash, to turn the lights on, and turn the alarms off, to take all of those steps to support that community usage of our facilities as well. Transportation services, Jim Little did a nice job of highlighting the extent of that, and it's again not just about delivering students to our schools, but we serve 140 schools, across a pretty wide swath of land, and do so over the course of 300 plus days a year. I also thought it was helpful to note, because I don't know that we always highlight the fact that we do in-house maintenance. So we have a garage, we have bus mechanics that do work on our buses, so those things aren't always outsourced to repair. We do a lot of that work in-house, again, to be as cost efficient as possible. Communication services, oftentimes the piece that brings all of this work together and communicates out to the public what we're doing, how we're doing it, emergency information, the COVID dashboard, live streaming, meetings such as this, providing support for student events, coordinating notices, supporting buildings with notifications to families. So Amy Buckman leads that team of 3 that supports all of that external communication that we do to families, not to mention the website, the maintenance of that, which are also partnering with members of the technology team that do that work as well. So again, trying to connect the dots where we provide services and connect with the community beyond what's happening in our classrooms every day. So how does this work? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's about the people, primarily our staff, and we have about over 1,500 employees, Lower Merion employees, including 835 staff members, professional staff members approximately, which will include our counselors, teachers, school psychologists, social workers, school nurses, et cetera. We have almost 670 support staff members, importantly secretaries, aides, custodians, drivers, et cetera, and then 75 administrative staff. Other employment categories of note, because they are, sort of individuals that we manage and in support of students, coaches and activity sponsors, while they're often also counted in those employee counts. We do have individuals that come in and coach, just are coaches for us. We have temporary and seasonal employment. We have independent contractors, such as our behavior specialists, our security individuals, and our OTPTs. In addition to that, we do utilize a substitute service, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, to obviously cover absences of staff. And then volunteers. Volunteers are not directly, they're not hired by us, they're not paid by us, obviously, but we do manage their entry into the district, clearances, et cetera. So we note that just because we want to talk about the scope of adults that work with our students, that's sort of the lay of the land. So as we move on into our staffing formula and factors, talked about how we meet students' needs and the needs of our community, and some of that is driven by a formula. So we have class size guidelines at the elementary level, for example, and we utilize that to determine what staffing will look like, and we'll take a little bit of a look at that in a minute. Special ed staffing, there are state guidelines that Ms. Frazier talked about during her presentation that dictate how we staff to some degree. Gifted support staffing, custodial maintenance personnel, we look at the volume of work by square footage, et cetera. Drivers, obviously based on the number of buses and our routing needs. IEPs drive support such as instructional behavior aids, and technology, obviously dependent to a large degree about how much we're trying to support in terms of devices, platforms, et cetera. We also have talked over time about other factors that don't have a precise formula necessarily, but do drive staffing decisions. Enrollment projections, as we know and as we've talked about, have shown growth over the years. Our most recent enrollment study reflects a decrease in students post, I wouldn't even say post-COVID, but during COVID. And so we are looking at that closely. We'll continue to look at studies such as this. I think it's just a starting point for what the impact of COVID is on enrollment, but it's certainly something we're keeping an eye on. That said, I mentioned earlier about class size guidelines. This is the enrollment currently for Kenwood Elementary School. And you can see across the top, hopefully you can see across the top, by grade level, you can see the class size guidelines. So for example, kindergarten has a class size guideline of 20 students, and first grade 22, et cetera. So we build our sort of projected numbers of staff that we need based on those guidelines and the enrollment that you see there. So across that top line right below the guidelines, 56 students are currently enrolled in kindergarten at Kenwood Elementary. That means we're looking at 3 sections, so that's 1.5 actually teachers, because those are 0.5 half-time kindergarten classes, which then yields an average of 18.7, which we don't have 0.7 students, so it's either 18 or 19 students per class. And seats available give us a chance to see, as we move numbers, how many seats are available to add more students, because students don't all just enroll by Labor Day. Students enroll all year long. Students also withdraw all year long. So these numbers fluctuate, over the course of the year. So it's never going to be perfect. And I highlight that because you see first grade, if that number had been greater than 92, which it was at the beginning of the school year, we would have had, I'm sorry, if that number had been 91 at the beginning of the school year, we may have only had 4 sections. But because the number was greater at the beginning of the school year, we opened the school with 5 sections. So again, it fluctuates over time, and we do our best to try to predict what it will look like from a staffing perspective in the summertime, because that's when we have to make some decisions about hiring before the school year begins. And then just to sort of highlight what we're seeing as somewhat of a decline and the impact of that, even if we're seeing a decline of maybe a few hundred students, what does that really mean at the school level? So I use, again, Kenwood and looking at those projections for next year. So you can see they're projected to lose approximately 9 students. 9 students doesn't change how many sections we need. So not every decline, and certainly not every increase in enrollment is going to just drop numbers from a facility perspective, from a staffing perspective, et cetera. It depends where they fall. We don't currently just decide we're going to take all this extra students and move them to another school. That's not how we've ever operated. I don't know any district that necessarily operates that way. We have a partner school program that helps us manage some of this, but we're never going to have exact numbers for the reasons I explained before. This is a fluctuating situation. So this is one example, but I can show you many examples of where those numbers aren't necessarily going to drive like increases or decreases in staffing. And in fact, you could see an increase in a section number, even though we're experiencing an overall decrease in student enrollment. So I think that's important to point out. Also a factor for us next year in terms of our staffing is the opening of Black Rock Middle School. We're very excited about that. That does drive new staff needs, building operating expenses, extracurricular activity expenses. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we went about the process of staffing Black Rock in a few minutes. Reimagining the K-4, 5-8 experience. That also drives some staffing considerations, because some of the things that we have done, bringing on introducing a STEM special at the elementary school, pushing world language to a more robust experience at the middle level, adding leadership as a course at the middle school. All of those new things require us to think about the staffing implications of that work, and how do we support it in a way that will create opportunities for success. I'm just going to flip ahead to my notes because I'm behind. Another factor that we're faced with that hasn't been as much been a reality for Lower Merion School District. To some degree, we do experience a bubble. We are a desirable employment situation for many, and historically have been. But the realities of the market conditions, the workforce at this time are impacting our work as well. So it's hard to turn on the news and not hear about what's happening in healthcare, what's happening with drivers, the candidate pool for us is the same as the candidate pool for many other industries. And when I talk about the services, that's why I think it's important for the community to know that it's not just about teachers in the classroom, which we're having, there are challenges with that as well. But supporting these other services, require that we have the ability to attract and hire qualified candidates to fill those positions. So that has an impact on how we think about the salaries we offer, our recruitment and retention strategies. Adding some additional funding for that purpose is important in a way that hasn't been necessarily the case for us historically. We talked about this earlier. Ms. Frazier covered this in her presentation as well, but just to note again, there's legal drivers of how we staff around special education. We've seen, as we've discussed, increases in students who are identified for special education services, which again drives staffing considerations. The specialized services by plans, you can see there, again, Ms. Frazier covered this as an increasing need for us as a district. And I think beyond those, again, the more formula-driven staffing conversations is about what students are coming to school and what needs they have at this point in time. And we saw this, and I sort of talked about this at the beginning, but the needs of students beyond an identified need. So this reflects all of there's about 680 little people here, which is about the size of Gladwin. And when you think about the identification of students, and it's not that students fit in boxes like this, they don't. There's overlap, there's different needs, but it serves to provide some visual of, we have students. Our population has needs that require staff, specialized staff, to support those needs. And when you do an overlay like this, which is the Robert Wood Johnson study that came out a few years ago that talk about traumatic experiences that students have. The study indicated that nearly 50% of our students come to school having had some sort of adverse childhood experience, meaning, you know, a death of a family member, a family member or close relative that is, you know, under the influence or using drugs or alcohol, illness of their own or a close family member or friend. So the categories of what might be considered a traumatic event or an ongoing crisis, and Ms. Fraser talked about this when we talked about the Prepare model, present in many different ways. But the bottom line is, this is why we have counselors. This is why we have social workers. These are the kids that need support because they don't necessarily come with an identification, but they come with a real, you know, a real life problem that is going to impact how they learn in the classroom. And just to add to that, a recent study that was just published in the Journal of the American Medical Association about children's health and well-being over the last year, 5 years, inclusive of some of that impact of the pandemic. I think the findings for me personally, and also for other administrators that have worked, I've worked with closely over the last few years. I mean, pre-pandemic, we were seeing a rise in the social emotional needs of students and the mental health crises that is affecting this country is here in Lower Merion. And this study sort of brings that to life, validating sort of what we've been experiencing, but also saying the pandemic is compounding that. So we really have to keep our eyes on that piece of what our students' needs are. And I would say, and what I'll talk about a little bit later, it's also about what our staff is experiencing as well. So no one is immune to what's happening here, and we need to figure out as an employer how to best, you know, not only support students but also our staff as well. So I'm halfway through. It's like Wednesday of this presentation. So we are now at the supporting the students and programs through our staffing plan for this year. Not to be repetitive, but I guess I will be. Formula and need driven is how we staff. Some programmatic enhancements, like the way we think about what we offer, the leadership, the STEM, all of those great things that are coming online need staffing considerations. So annually we ask our department chair, our department supervisors, our principals to tell us what their needs are, and at the same time we're building what we think our needs are too, based on all of those factors that I shared with you. Those are vetted, and it's, again, we don't just say yes to everything. We actually say no a whole heck of a lot to what people would like to do and what the actual needs are and what the budget will allow us to do. This year was like no other for many reasons, one of which was taking that top graph of what our alignment of schools look like now and plan for next year, which looks totally different. You know, fewer students, K-4, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I want to give you the perspective of how do we figure out the puzzle that is staffing a new school with a projected, 1,000 plus students. And so we had a process for that, that took into account what those needs were, what the new schedule was going to look like, the redesign of that, where our services were going to be offered for our specialized programs, and importantly, staff voice. We asked our staff, given all of this change, what would you like to do? And we considered I can share with you in honesty and full transparency, we really looked at every single staff member's responses in consideration of how we moved our staff to realign our schools. That was demonstrated on that last slide. So that took many days of being locked in rooms, talking about what that looked like, talking about what the need was, who needed to go there, who wanted to go there, and that was over the course of many weeks. Ultimately, and we did stay true to this timeline. We shared out with our staff what their, and worked closely with our LMEA leadership, but then shared out what those staffing decisions were in January to February timeframe, which allowed us to make these ultimate budget decisions, recommendations based on what those I wouldn't say excess, but what those needs were that remained that we couldn't staff with our own staff. So if you think about the scale of the movement that we undertook to staff the new school, I think with that context and perspective, when you look at what we're adding for next year as new staff, you can see, I hope that you can see that we made every effort to staff up as much as we could with existing staff. Our goal was to try to be staff neutral. And we knew that was not going to happen, but we looked at that as one of our objectives. We wanted to make sure we were satisfying all of those other needs of meeting students, meeting the programmatic needs, et cetera, but we also were very conscious of the budget piece of opening a new school. So what you see there, I think if you wanted to think about it from the standpoint of what the program sort of drove, the new schedule, the K-4 reimagination, that there's about 6.24 positions there that are more in line with what the programmatic needs are. So the math, the art, the leadership, et cetera, are reflective of the needs of the program. And the balance of that, approximately 9.4, are how we would staff any building, meaning we have a school psychologist. At the middle level, we have a coordinator of school culture and climate. At the middle level, we have a social worker, et cetera. Speech language therapists, special education teachers, and our ELD teacher support are all driven by, again, those needs that we're projecting for next year. But again, I think the idea is that we staffed as leanly as possible, given all of those moving parts that we were trying to manage for next year. The second slide of the new staffing, and this was also reflected in Mr. Orlando's presentation and Dr. Mameen's presentation on Monday night, the new staffing needs. So this is just, sorry, the format and color is a little bit different than that, but you can see we also have added the additional 0.5 for Ms. Stout's position. We're adding an assistant principal as we projected, and then the support that we also need to open Black Rock Middle School. In addition to, you see there, 5 drivers are being added to support the transportation across the district. And I should note that we aren't just looking for 5 new drivers. We are in a deficit situation relative to drivers at this point. We have about 22 driver positions that need to be filled, in addition to the 5 drivers that we're adding for next year. So if you know any drivers, this is, please share that information, spread the word. And we have, again, going back to those market conditions, proposed some enhancements to the salary, et cetera, that will aid in some of our recruitment efforts relative to drivers and some other key positions. So now we're Thursday. Part 4, salary and benefits costs. So all of those additions that I just spoke about and the why behind them just generally speaking, salary and benefits drive the majority of our budget. 77% of our budget is about salary and benefits. Notably, I think this question was asked earlier in one of the presentations here. Approximately 2.7 million or 2% of the budget reflects the increase related to new personnel. The approximately 3.1 million or 2.3% of the budget reflects increases related to the collective bargaining agreement, other agreements that have already been bargained, already been in place. So these are sort of natural increases to salaries. So, just as a comparison, I think the federal cost of living adjustment for 2022 for the Philadelphia area was 2.94. So if you think about the salaries and increase, the 2.3% is around where the public sector is seeing increases for the 2022 school year, or 2022 fiscal year. As you can see over time, where our salaries and benefits have increased. Again, salaries are up a little bit higher this year due to the bringing online Black Rock Middle School. And there you do see an increase in benefits, whereas last year we saw a slight decrease. And those increases are due to bringing on new staff, increases in healthcare costs, Social Security, and PSERS. It's also noted, just to circle back to where we see some real needs, is supporting student mental health. We have added through our ESSER funding, which Dr. McGloin presented, I think, a few board meetings ago, 2 guidance counselors and 3 middle school academic support positions that are being supported by those ESSER funds. So that's not reflected in that overall budget number, but is, I think, an important note relative to the areas of focus that we have for staffing. And then finally, Friday, here we are, Friday. Our Human Resources Department, we spent a little time over the last year reorganizing as a result of some retirements. We have brought on board we reimagined a position there and brought on board a supervisor of employee relations. Again, sort of with the eye towards meeting staff needs as well, and someone that can serve as more of a go-to to support staff. COVID has had an impact on all of us, and thinking about how we could realign our department in a way that had a more public-facing role in supporting staff needs. We have a number of applicants year over year, averaging 7,500. That can fluctuate, but again, we do believe people are like to think about working for Lower Merion School District. We have a nice salary and benefits package. We post our jobs on our website. We are represented at many recruitment fairs. I'll flash a slide about that in a second. Our application process is through an online platform, Talent Ed. We conduct screening interviews, typically multiple rounds of interviews for any position that we hire for in the district, and I feel confident in saying that our employees that come on board are very well vetted and are highly qualified individuals to serve our students across the district. And for more information, please check out the HR website, which is available to the community at the address below. Recruitment fairs, last year this was a pretty short list because of COVID. This year we're excited, we're able to get out more, make more connections across the Delaware Valley. This is an example of some of those fairs that we're attending. Other sort of enhancements and updates connected somewhat to the DEI study that's happening and getting some feedback from that. We've created an applicant guide to provide to applicants who are going through the process because, as I mentioned, it is sort of a lengthy process, giving them some tips, some information about what to expect. I mentioned the restructuring of our department. We have representatives on the Achievement Imperative Task Force that are very much bringing in, embedding equity-aligned processes into the HR, into our work in HR, whether it be just supporting staff, but also the interview applicant process. And just to wrap up, and I've mentioned this a couple times throughout, we are not immune to the pandemic from a staffing perspective. Staff, like students, are, and like all of us, have felt an impact because of COVID, and we are continually monitoring that from the standpoint of staff wellness. What can we do to support staff attendance? We are unlike other industries where work from home is a real option on a regular basis. We are in person with children, every day that school is open. So while other industries can flex maybe into a hybrid model, that's not something that's available to the majority of our staff. And so it's about managing or trying to manage and support staff wellness on a daily basis in person. That said, the staff here is just, has been tremendous and has gone above and beyond and continues to go above and beyond in serving this community and the students here. They take on roles that are voluntary. They've been essential to the work of the K4 and 5-8 committees that reimagined the schedule. They sit on our. They come to CARE. They come to our GSIB meetings. They are involved. They are very active in making a great community even better. And so I think people didn't want me to end on a negative note, so I do, absolutely celebrate, and I think we all do, just and grateful for the people that we're surrounded by here in the district, trying to make everyone's, lives a little bit better. So that's it. We're at the weekend, so. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
I just have two really quick ones. And let me just make sure. And I love that you number your slides. That gives me like a lot of joy. So the question about, so one of the things you said about, and Kimberly went through this last time and it was fantastic, but staffing is governed not just by what we deem is important and the budget, but also state rules as well. Mm-hmm. And I got lost because I didn't know, I thought gifted wasn't under state rules. I'm sorry, I'm like looking at you because I know it's probably a you question. And that's the only clarification that I needed to understand, because it said like special ed state rules, but I wasn't sure about gifted.
Yeah, I may have been clumsy and
It's okay. Thank you. So gifted education is not federally mandated. So it's different across the country. But there is a PA school code that does dictate gifted services. And so you have both Chapter 14, Chapter 16, special education and gifted education. And within both of those are identified caseload maximums within. Special education is a little more complex because it looks at type of support. So the caseload maximums for a speech and language therapist are different than autistic support teachers, emotional support teachers.
Got it. I think I was blending the federal and state. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for helping my learning. And then the second question, and you ended on this so perfectly, but I don't know if you can put a number to it, because I think it's such an important thing to talk about retention, especially when we're looking at an education pipeline for all jobs that has been devastated, but not just because of COVID, for 10 years. And that we see schools of education shutting down across this country. So there are not teachers out there, but there's not other staff as well. So retention matters so much. is there a number you can put around that? Like, it's 10% less expensive to retain than it is to new? And I don't know if that's true at all, but I just wanted to ask.
No, I think I personally don't have that number. I think it did trigger me in thinking about, the ways in which we differ from like the private sector, for example. We don't have the vacation giveaway. We don't have the bonuses that someone can, earn up to at the end of the year. That's not how public education has traditionally been structured or how our collective bargaining agreements work. So it's about trying to figure out how do we really value the people that we have in a way that, supports that retention piece, because I actually don't have a number. I wish I did have a number that you ask about, but I think we're very mindful of, since the beginning of the school year, even beyond, we've had intentional conversations across, administration regularly, like, what are we going to do? I don't think that, I wish I had a solution. And that's why I wanted to end with that, because I think it's an ongoing reality for us of what are we going to do, because this isn't just a Lower Merion problem, but it is also a Lower Merion problem. And so we need to continue to search for ways that, keep our staff here, as well as find those candidates out there that will, jump on board as we see retirements and those people that do leave.
Thanks.
You mentioned that you were going to go over the staffing of substitutes, and I think I missed that.
I'm sorry, I may have forgotten in my notes where I was going to talk about that. So we do have a staffing service that we moved to a couple years ago, trying to be in a better position to fill substitute needs, because while we were managing it in-house, we were seeing that decline of available substitutes to fill roles. So we thought, well, we need to try other options, and one of those options was to utilize the substitute service. Well, they're not immune to these issues either, and so they are struggling to find substitutes, which we sort of get into the cycle of absences, which we naturally have more absences in a pandemic because we have people that are sick, we have family members that are sick, we have caregivers that need to be with family members that are sick. So the stress, I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit beyond your question, but the stress of coverages when we don't have substitutes for the staff that is here is another reality. So we compound the situation every time we have a lack of a substitute, because we have staff that has to step in and do that coverage. And we're continuing to search for ways to add, you've probably seen it in other districts, like signs, substitutes, looking for substitutes needed. And it's, we in addition to using a sub-service, we also have employed building subs, which we, I think are somewhat more desirable positions because they offer like a steady guaranteed number of days versus a per diem sub, which is just a sub that's hired daily or works daily for us as needed. And even with that strategy, what we find is if we bring on a building sub, when a position opens up, that person often moves into a long-term substitute position for us. So they take on a different role once they're in here, and then we find ourselves needing a building substitute. So there are real challenges with our meeting the needs of our substitute pool here in the district, and we've tried a variety of ways to do that.
Thank you. And then when we're considering things like full-day kindergarten and things like that, people feel like all you have to do is just do it. That was an example of what we heard on Monday night. And just give us a little bit about, you can't just do it.
Yeah, right. So using I mean, there's a couple of examples that we talked about that I think translate into like why there's not really an on and off switch. The transition to the new middle school and all of the factors that went into thinking about how do you staff that, how do you program for that. We do it in a way that's thoughtful, that's budget-minded, that is going to be sustainable. And so we like to think that anything like large scale like that is going to involve, not like to think, but needs to involve that amount of work. And when you layer on, and I think this sort of applies to a lot of different things that we really want to do, we think are important, I think the board values, but when you talk about the realities of the people that are doing the work, this is where we are. And we are, you know, first and foremost focused on the students that are in front of us and the needs that they are exhibiting and we know that they have, and doing our best to not only open a new school but manage a crisis that affects not only students but staff as well.
And then in terms of the bus driver shortage,
Yes.
we have an issue, right? I mean, we
Correct.
can't just, and then we can't just hire bus drivers either, like bus driver services.
No, we did look at that option. It was very cost prohibitive to move in that direction. We do, just for the community, all of these services we talked about are all in-house, just to reinforce. These are all our employees. We value that. The board has always valued having in-house positions, support positions such as drivers. The reality is, though, once you identify a candidate, we used to only look at candidates that had the bus driver certification and were ready to drive. I'm looking at Mr. Lill if he wants to I feel his presence behind me. But we have moved to the point where we want to we will train individuals, and we are still struggling to find individuals to offer that training to and to license to drive our buses. So I mentioned the 5 drivers. We are down already drivers that we know we need in order to bring Blackrock online. So while we've sort of managed with the 10 schools being down that many drivers, we need those drivers to work to make next year's transportation situation feasible. Did you want to?
So just to clarify, and by no means not to contradict Ms. Schaefer, we currently do have some contracted services that we utilize within Lower Merion School District. Now, getting children to school, you know, our 10 buildings, those are our buses, those are our drivers. Specific situations where we use contracted services, vehicles and drivers, special needs, some out-of-district placements, you know, one student going to one location outside of the boundary lines of the district, that's more efficiently handled by a contractor, either Atlas, Balgo, who will send a sedan or a van and provide the driver, the aid, and the vehicle that's really appropriate for something like that. So whatever it takes, we will get children to their facility, and we certainly provide the accommodations and any physical assistance necessary. So there's contracted services there. That's the Atlas and the Balgos occasionally. Sports trips, because of the dynamic where you have afternoon games and practices at the same time that our fleet and our drivers are doing high school, middle school, and elementary dismissal, we do have companies that provide sports runs, and the one name's now escaping me. So that's a concern, because these outside contractors are struggling with the same issues with staffing. There's just, certainly their services are in demand, so a little bit of a bidding war. And if you can give me a 6-hour run, if School District X can give us a 6-hour run, are they going to take a 4-hour run from us to do sports? We're juggling that and we're handling that. But the important thing is we know our obligation is to get them to school. We will certainly make sure that all of our students are covered regardless of needs. And, bringing new drivers on board is a significant amount of training, state-required licensings. In addition to the CDL, there are endorsements that you have to have on your license. And we also are very conscious of the fact we're responsible for those vehicles. We're responsible for those children. And that's a responsibility that our transportation department, I think, handles very well.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this staffing and IT very informative meeting. And we have one more meeting on May 11th, I believe, and it's covering curriculum and instruction. Thank you, and we're adjourned.